Have you ever just stopped and asked yourself, is what I'm seeing actually real? It sounds kind of out there, right? But today, we're going to dive into some fascinating neuroscience that suggests our reality, well, it's a lot more like a construction project than a simple photograph. Let's get into how our brains actually build the world we think we see. Okay, let's start with a little thought experiment. Just picture this. Someone's washing their hands at a sink, but the water running down the drain, it's deep red. What's the first thing that pops into your head? Just hold that thought for a second. So if you're anything like me and you've been binging the latest true crime docuseries, your mind probably goes straight to a dark place, right? A grimy bathroom, something sinister, you know the vibe. Your brain is literally filling in the blanks based on the stories it's been fed recently. But what if we change the context? Let's say instead of a bathroom, they're in a kitchen. All of a sudden, the scene feels totally different. Less sinister, right? It's probably just a clumsy but pretty common kitchen accident. See? Same red water, but a completely different story. Or hey, let's try one more. What if they're in an art studio? Now that red stuff isn't blood at all, it's just stubborn cadmium paint they're trying to wash off. And this right here illustrates the core problem perfectly. You have the exact same visual cue, red water, leading to three totally different realities, and it all comes down to context and your own past experiences. So this brings us right to the heart of what neuroscientists call the perception problem. And the mystery here isn't just about how we interpret complicated scenes, it goes way deeper. It's about the fundamental building blocks of everything we see. Okay, so here's the really crucial point. Our eyes, they're not objective scientific instruments. Not at all. A machine, something like a spectrophotometer, would measure the wavelength of that red light and give you the exact same number every single time. But our eyes, they're constantly being fooled by the light in the room, by the colors next to it, and even by what our brain expects to see. So the red you perceive is a totally subjective experience, not some objective fact out there in the world.
So how in the world do we make sense of anything if our own senses can't even capture it accurately? Well, to help us unravel this, we're going to turn to the work of a really incredible figure in neuroscience, a guy named Dale Purves.
Purves is what you'd call a scientist's scientist. I mean, this guy, throughout his entire career, kept making these huge, radical shifts in what he was studying. He wasn't chasing the hot new trend. He was chasing the biggest, most fundamental questions about how the brain really works. And just to be clear, we're not talking about some fringe thinker here. This is one of the most respected neuroscientists of his generation. He was elected to both the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Medicine. I mean, those are some of the highest honors you can get in the US. Plus, he literally wrote the book on neuroscience, a classic textbook that's used to teach students all over the world. Now, to really get a grip on his most radical idea, the one about perception, we actually have to go back and look at his earlier work. This is where he uncovered this incredible dynamic dance that's always happening between our bodies and our brains. It's called trophic theory. And the core idea is pretty mind-blowing. Think of the brain's wiring. It's not like a static computer circuit board, all pre-planned and fixed in place. No way. Instead, the connections your neurons make are constantly being shaped and fine-tuned by the very things they connect to, like your muscles and your organs. The body is literally telling the brain how to wire itself. This whole theory was inspired by this really classic experiment. A scientist named Victor Hamburger noticed something odd. Chick embryos actually start out with more neurons than adult chickens have. And he found that if you remove a developing wing from an embryo, a bunch of the neurons that were supposed to go to that wing just don't survive. But, and this is the wild part, if you surgically add an extra wing, you can actually rescue neurons that would have normally died off. So Purves took that idea and just ran with it. He and his team showed that in young animals, the brain's circuits are all tangled up, a ton of neurons making all these weak, tentative connections. But over time, through competition and interaction, these circuits start to untangle. The extra, useless connections get pruned away, and the right ones get stronger. It's not about following some rigid blueprint. It's all about adaptation. So the big takeaway here from this early part of Purves's work is this. You just can't separate the brain from the body. They're not two different things. They are one single dynamic network. And the needs of the body are what directly shape the structure of the brain. This idea became the foundation for everything that came next, and it would eventually lead him to question, well, everything. Right, so after making his name with this foundational theory, Purves does something that very few successful scientists ever do. He pivots radically.
He starts questioning the very things that neuroscientists thought were the most beautiful parts of the brain's anatomy.
See, at the time, the whole field was obsessed with these beautiful, repeating patterns they were finding in the brain. They had these cool names like blobs and barrels, and everyone assumed they had these very specific jobs, like processing color or feeling a whisker touch. But Purves came along and argued that these patterns were, in his words, epiphenomenal, basically just pretty byproducts, not the key to how things actually worked.
And he wasn't just talking, he had the evidence to back it up. Take those so-called color blobs. Turns out, they exist even in nocturnal primates that can barely see in color. And the whisker barrels you see in rats? Well, chinchillas have them too, but they don't use their whiskers in the same way at all. And then you have cats and dogs, they've got whiskers, but no barrel cortex whatsoever. The whole idea that these beautiful structures had one specific function, it was starting to fall apart. So all of this questioning, all this poking at assumptions, it led Purves to his most profound and, honestly, challenging work. It's a groundbreaking theory that completely redefines what it even means to see. It all kicks off with this classic philosophical and scientific puzzle called the inverse optics problem. I mean, think about it for a second. The world out there is 3D, right? But the image that actually hits the back of your eye on your retina is totally flat. It's 2D. An infinite number of different 3D objects could create the exact same flat image. So how on earth does your brain solve this seemingly impossible puzzle? How does it build a 3D world from a 2D picture? There's this incredibly powerful story that comes from studies of patients who gain sight for the first time. It makes the problem so clear. Imagine someone who's been blind from birth, and then through surgery they can see. If you show them a cube and a sphere, they have no idea what they're looking at. None. They can see them, but they can't tell them apart until they're allowed to touch them. It's only then that they can connect the visual information to their past experience. It turns out seeing isn't automatic. It's something you have to learn. And this is where Purves' revolutionary answer comes in. He says the brain doesn't solve this inverse optics problem by trying to calculate the true reality of the world. It doesn't even need to. Instead, it just generates a perception based entirely on what has proven useful in the past. Let me say that again. We don't see what's really there. We see what our past experience has taught us works for survival and getting around. So how does this actually work? Well, it's through a lifetime of trial and error, basically. We learn to link a visual stimulus, the context we see it in, and what happens when we act on it. Every single time we successfully interact with the world, like you reach for a cup and grab it, it strengthens those neural pathways. Bit by bit, we're building our own unique personal reality, our own little bubble of the world. And this brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? Back to that red water in the sink. And it leads us to a really deep, almost philosophical question that grows right out of all this science. So if our perception isn't built on some objective truth out there, but on a whole lifetime of our own individual experiences, what does that mean for the reality we think we all share? I mean, the only reason you and I can both look at a chair and agree that's a chair is because we have pretty similar bodies, and we've both had similar enough experiences interacting with chairs. But what Purves' work really forces us to confront is this. Just how much of the world you see is a world that only you can see.